and more should be coming, and more should be coming. So our topic is spiritual companionship in our times. And it's really a road less traveled in that we don't have detailed guidelines, but it's something which is very essential. You know, the saying, even prophets needed companions. Peace be upon them. Muhammad had companions, spiritual companions. Jesus had spiritual companions. The Buddha had spiritual companions. So it is critical. So let's first of all start with something that you know very well. We all desperately need community in our life. Circles of love, as Rumi calls it. And of course, you know, whenever I think of community and the critical, essential need for it, what splashes in my heart are those two verses, which is just imprinted there by Rumi. And I hope some of you know it by heart. A wall standing alone is useless. Add to it other walls. Add to it other walls. It can support a roof, even a granary. Only when ink joins with a pen can the blank paper say something. Only when ink joins with a pen can the blank paper say something. I don't know how many of you subscribe to New York Times. I was reading an article the other day, very remarkable article. I should send it to you, in our play work, saying that what really people have missed in this pandemic is that circle of love. But essentially, what I think sociologists call collective effervescence. Think about it. We're missing out on collective effervescence, which comes by interacting with our circle of family, friends, community. The article said research shows that in that circle, in person when you meet, on the average, people laugh 5 times more than when they're alone. And I love that one insight they had, that joy shared is joy sustained. Joy shared is joy sustained. Okay, all this about we need community, and I want to remind you again, and this is something which I'd like you to check up on, study a little bit more, is that if you remember that Harvard study, the longest study on human happiness, what are the factors contributing to happiness? That 80 years old plus, 80 years plus, so, survey, research. And what did they find, if you remember? The number one determinant of happiness and even longevity was having relationships. You didn't have to be perfect, but reliable relationships. Do you remember the second study? Brigham Young University, a 7-year-old study. Not surprisingly, they came up with the same finding. Not only happiness, also longevity of life, relationships. But number 2 was very surprising, that how you interact with others, and especially those you meet casually. The bank teller, the mail person, the mailman, mailwoman, the grocery clerk. How you interact has an effect on you physiologically, mentally, emotionally, contributing to the, you might say, the accumulation of happiness in your life. So just be with that does that resonate? Is that happening in my life? So what else do you think of when you think of community? I don't know why. Some things get imprinted. I think of this Bollywood movie where there is this a mother, a woman who doesn't speak English very well. I'll cut the long story short. She comes with her husband to America for visiting. Her English is very poor and she's very self-conscious. Even her children make fun of her. She doesn't speak English. And they attend a marriage ceremony. And in that marriage, she's suddenly asked to give a talk, to say something, but she can't speak English. So she stands up and kind of, I hope I get not exact words, but the content of his word was very simple. She said, this world, very big, very big, very big world. In big world, make small world. Get married, marriage good. Marry, children, friends. Small world in big world, happy. That was her basic message. But it had it had a profound effect on me. It summarized everything very beautiful. So just be with that for a few moments. The critical need for community. So now we are moving ahead. So there comes a time now as we proceed on our journey, trials and tribulations, we learn from experience, from our mistakes, from events, from circumstances. There comes a time in our life we feel a need for now what is called spiritual companionship. Like Rumi says, there'll come a time when you'll realize there is a kiss we want all our lives. There is a kiss we want all our lives, a touch of spirit on the body. And I love the expression of joy in Rabia's heart, that beloved female sage in Islam, the 9th century female sage, who said, he did not leave after he kissed me one day. This is Ladinsky's interpretation of Hafiz. He did not leave after he kissed me one day, feeling the glow of presence. You know that wonderful saying we have focused on many times in the past? Who is a spiritual human being? Or a developed human being, a evolved human being? The wonderful saying is that person is someone who participates fully in the bazaar of life, marrying, having children, buying and selling, having mother-in-law problems, father-in-law problems, mortgage problems, but never once forgetting God. How do we build that practice, that habit? We need spiritual companions to remind us, to reinforce the joy of spirituality, of that kiss, of the glow of presence. There comes a time in our life when we realize, I really want to be more loving, more compassionate, more forgiving. How do I do that? Where do I learn the tools? You know, the sages also say, not just individually, if you are somebody who really wants to make a difference in the world to fulfill the purpose why you are here, to serve God's creation, besides becoming more complete as a human being, if you want to resolve and solve and deal with the social justice issues of our time, we have to become aware of our biases, prejudices, stereotyping of the other. It requires spiritual practices. I hope you know it by heart now, by that wonderful environmental advisor to President Carter, who said, for 30 years, I've thought that the biggest environmental problems are loss of biodiversity, climate change, ecosystem collapse, and that with good science, we could take care of it. But now I've realized the biggest environmental problems are selfishness, greed, apathy. Science cannot take care of it. Religious beliefs cannot take care of it. It requires practices. Prophet Muhammad said, your spiritual practices are only as good as those of your close friends. Choose your friends wisely. In the past, in the Sufi tradition, it was fairly common for anyone, to be spending lots of time with a teacher, a spiritual teacher. Sometimes for a lifetime, sometimes for, just many, many years. But now that's not possible. So what do we have, or what can we place to replace that in modern times? So a lot of Sufi sages are saying we have to create that circle of spiritual companions. So just be with that for a few moments. How does that resonate for you? What questions come up for you? We always need a teacher. I love the metaphor that, we're like water that needs to boil on the fire. And the teacher is that kettle, the container that holds the water. So we can really be boiled, purified. Okay, so let's move into something again that is the core of what we keep saying all the time. What constitutes an authentic circle of love? And I know that you know it by heart, because we've asked you this over the years, and I can see familiar faces. The first criteria is the gateway of love. I might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 spiritual companions, but the first gateway is there love between me and that member of my circle? Who remembers the second one? You can unmute and just say it. The second gateway.
Trust.
Trust. Wonderful. Absolutely. Without trust, there is no willingness, ability to be vulnerable. Without vulnerability, there is no authentic community. Okay, the third one. Carrie, you remember?
Loving the truth.
Thank you. Thank you. The aspiration for truth. So the gateway of love, trust, truth. So once again, ask yourself, who is it in my life that passes those gateways. And just be with that. And by the way, it doesn't have to be perfect in terms of perfect love, perfect trust, and whatever that means, aspiration for the pure truth. But approximating as best as you humanly can. You know, the sages have another saying that, Jamal, if you want a friend who is faultless, you will be friendless. So as best as you humanly can. I actually love the saying of the 10th century Ibn Khafif. Anybody remember? We mentioned it many times, that famous sage, 10th century Ibn Khafif, who says, find someone the sight of whom what? Carrie, you remember? The sight of whom reminds you of God, or whatever you call that, spirit, something higher than human personality. The awe of whom, the awe, A-W-E, awe of whom moves your heart. The sight of whom reminds you of Spirit, God. The awe of whom moves your heart, and is someone who counsels you, not with the tongue of words, but the tongue of deeds. I might be just spouting Rumi again and again and again, but Jamal, are you living them? That's the key. So do you have somebody in your life, the sight of whom reminds you of, Spirit of God, of something beautiful? The awe of whom touches you, moves your heart. And is someone who counsels you, not with the tongue of words, but with the tongue of deeds. So I want to say, in my life, I've always been very interested in this aspiration. And so throughout my life, even when I was young, I used to always ask, how do I create this circle in my life? Maybe I start having coffee or snacks with someone as I grew older, go on a walk with somebody I like very much, share moments of silence. And as I grew older, I did more and more of that. I loved hosting people over to the house for dinner, for lunch. I used to be a great cook, and just cook, and just over food, I would create that bonding, that connection. It can be through sharing spiritual practices, sharing books. But I made a conscious effort to create that in my life, so I know it is possible. So I've always had, as I've grown, even to this ripe old age, always had a circle of spiritual companions. And I know the meaning of collective effervescence, the meaning of joy shared is joy sustained. And one practice we used to do quite often is just pair up. Let's say if you're 5 or 6 people, that or 4 people that be very close friends, spiritual companions, we should pair up, and or even in that same presence, we would choose an issue in our life, a difficulty, a problem that begs some spiritual guidance, spiritual healing, spiritual illumination. Let's say I'm that person who wants to share, and the others would just be there, and the others would be truly present and just listen. And all I would do is just share and share. And there would be silent, no questions, but really listening. And you'll be amazed at the healing which comes from this. We got this idea. Some of the same friends, we went to hear a lecture, and there was this very, very wonderful spiritual counselor who was saying that, in his counseling, he talks very little, almost says nothing, but is really authentically, genuinely present. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to land, tiknatan. Listen. You remember what Rumi said? Listening metaphorically is like putting your head on the person's chest and sinking into the answer. They're present. They're listening. So this counselor was telling us, very famous counselor, spiritual counselor, that, some of his clients at the end of the session, they thank him so profusely for the wonderful wisdom he gave them, for the beautiful things he said. And what he was trying to point out was, I did not say one word. I was just there silent. I just listened. But so much was transmitted just through that vibration, that energy of authentic listening, authentically being present. So right now, I want you to start thinking about what is an issue that you'd be willing, if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to share with the other, that is begging for some spiritual guidance, healing, illumination. Just think about it. Okay, I'm looking at one last thing I want to say before we do just a little exercise is something that I know that but it's very critical to talk about it again and actually do an exercise on that. When did you first become a spiritual seeker? Those are on the timeline of your life, those events, joyous or painful, those circumstances, maybe you met a teacher, those questions you've had in your life, some insight you read in a book, a teacher you met. What was it on the timeline of your life that slowly, little by little, or it happened in one singular moment, made you turn in the direction of becoming a seeker? Where you said to yourself, I really want to become a better human being. I really want my life to have meaning. For you, for you to hear again and again from me, I'll repeat it. For me, it was, of course, many things, but one singular event where in the space of 20 days, my mother first died, and my father was so heartbroken, he also died. So in 20 days, I lost both my parents, and that woke me up. So that you can call a singular event. And I've never forgotten that poetry, the one that Ladinsky says about Hafiz having uttered it or written it. Something missing in my heart tonight. Something missing in my heart tonight has made my eyes so soft, my voice so tender, my need for God absolutely clear. I think that event made me a seeker. Maybe you met a teacher or several teachers that made you move, as the mystics say, from a knowledge of the tongue to a knowledge of the heart. You woke up. You move from a knowledge of the tongue to a knowledge of the heart. For Mahatma Gandhi, it was many things, but one particular verse he read in his lowest moment when he was in total despair, felt totally humiliated. And what was that one verse? Do anybody remember? That really shook Gandhi's life and make him a seeker? What
God
was
is
it about it? Say it again. Say it again, Kerry.
God is truth.
Terrific. Yeah, the truth is God. But you're right. Yeah. So from the Bhagavad Gita, truth is God. Thank you, Kerry. Truth is God. And that just splashed in his heart, went deep inside of him. And he felt such joy, such healing, such empowerment. All I have to do is speak the truth, be truthful, live the truth, and I shall acquire divine powers. And he did just that. Truth is God. God is truth. It could be a question, a question that really is not so much weighing on you, but it really is constantly in your mind and heart. You want the answer to that. That motivates you to becoming a seeker. Who remembers what was the question in the mind of the Buddha, which made him a seeker, which made him give up his kingdom, for a time his family, and for 7 years he wandered into the jungles of India, seeking answers, becoming a seeker, just wanting to know, wanting to know. What was that question? Carrie knows. Go ahead, Carrie.
Why is there suffering in the world?
That's one. But how about there was another one?
Why would a mother give birth to a child knowing that they would be sick and grow old and die?
Beautiful. You remembered. That was the question which haunted the Buddha. Why would a mother want to give birth to a child who would grow old, who would grow sick, inevitably die? It just doesn't make sense to him. That made him a seeker. It could be a joyous moment, watching a sunset. In the last class, I was talking about this father who said he became a seeker when, he was a drunkard, always getting drunk. But he loved his little baby, infant child, and he used to always pick her up, even when he was drunk. And one day he just noticed in his drunkenness that the child came to kiss the father, but kind of shrank because of the smell of the alcohol. And just that sight of his beautiful, angelic daughter momentarily squirming her face and turning her face away because of the smell of the alcohol on the father's breath. That emotion was so strong, it motivated. He said, his words were, I just could not tolerate it. I got to become a better human being. I've got to be a model for my child. Okay, so having said all that, what was it for you? So think about it. And Saliju has some questions. I think you put in the chat box, Saliju, I think. Let's see.
Yeah, I haven't yet, but why don't you go ahead and say them and I'll type them. And
Okay.
Explain, this will be a little bit longer writing exercise than the ones we've been doing in previous classes.
For 10 minutes, I really want you to think about it and write it. This is a wonderful exercise in the traditions. So on the timeline of your life, when in your life do you believe you became a spiritual seeker? Was there a related event that occurred? Was there a deep, profound question involved? Was it someone you turned to for guidance or help? Or did you find guidance in a particular book? Or did you get it from some spiritual insight? You know, I remember just to let you know, because it struck me so beautifully. Uh, when I was always thinking about God, and I read poetry, by Christian, right? Said, "Oh, sister almond tree, oh, sister almond tree, oh, tree, tell me about God." And the almond tree blossomed. Just that poetry, that insight, it really resonated. So once again, on the timeline of your life, when in your life do you believe you became a spiritual seeker? Was it a related event that occurred? Was there a deep, profound question involved? Did you turn to anyone for guidance or help? Did you find the guidance in a book? Did you get some spiritual insight from an experience or from something you heard or read? Think about it and put it in your journal.
So the idea here is when you start with the question and let yourself, and some people will want to write with words, some people might want to draw pictures or designs or use other ways of recording their thoughts, but the idea is to keep writing and use the questions to help spur your writing. But if your mind goes off on a different direction, go ahead and let it go in whatever direction it takes you, but try to keep writing. And if you get stuck, then look back at the prompts and see if they will help you keep going. And the idea is this is not going to be something we're going to share in our smaller groups. This is totally personal. It's not something we're going to talk to anybody about, but it's just we're just asking you to go deep into this and try. It might be, like Jamal said, it might be one major incident. It might be several other, several separate instances in your life. But the idea is not to make it make sense to anyone else but yourself. The idea is the writing is strictly self-introspective writing, which is a little different than we've done in the past. In the past, we've shared these exercises. This one is not to be shared, and it's just your own inner thoughts. So I've put in the chat the questions that Jamal mentioned and the sort of the subcategories, but let your mind go and write and let it flow however it flows the best for you. Okay.
And trust that it has value as you go deeper into it. You might be surprised.